Hi there everybody, I'm Philip Idson and I want to thank you for listening in to episode 255 of the Art of Procurement podcast. If you're new to the pod, our goal is to help inspire and to demystify the change journeys that are really necessary for us all to elevate the role of procurement. Now, typically, I do that through interviewing leaders from both inside and outside of procurement. And once a month, I bring the team together to record this month in procurement. Back when we started the pod almost 4 years ago, I actually created a lot of solo podcasts where I'd share some tactics that we can use in our pursuit to increase our impact. And those are always good fun, but I've not done it so often recently. Well, if you listened to last week's show, you'll actually have heard that I shared we'd be having a pod this week with the entire team. Well, unfortunately, schedules just got in the way. And so look out for that podcast. It's still going to come in June. It's going to be June the 24th. But I thought that today would be a great day to actually bring back that solo pod format. Now, the reason that we had scheduling challenges is that we've been working day and night this week to put the finishing touches on a brand new offering that we cannot wait to share with you. It's called AOP Mastermind, so Art of Procurement Mastermind. It's a brand new way to collaborate, network, and learn with peers across procurement, and it's all from the comfort of your desk. You're going to be hearing a lot more about this over the next week or two. And if it's piqued your interest, just make sure that you signed up at our email list because we're going to be emailing our subscribers with all the details as we ramp up to launch. So you can sign up to that email list at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. And another reason to sign up to our email list is we're actually going to restart our This Week in Procurement newsletter this week. Just go to the same link to subscribe. You'll get everything by going there. It's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. And This Week in Procurement is something that we've actually done on and off for 3.5 years. I wrote about it a little bit in our annual letter, the end of 2018, about not being so sure about what to do with it. Well, I'm just really excited to say that it's coming back. So the first of the new format of This Week in Procurement should be coming out. If you're listening to this on the day of publication, which is June the 3rd, it'll be coming out tomorrow, Tuesday, June the 4th. So on to the topic that I wanted to bring up today. And it's something that we all struggle with. We all struggle with gaining alignment with our stakeholders. Whether we're responsible for procurement and the stakeholder is the C-suite, or perhaps we're developing a category strategy and our stakeholders are the business users. You know, alignment continues to be one of the greatest challenges for procurement. It really is a differentiator that determines whether you're perceived as being a trusted advisor or a back office function. But I'd argue that it's also a little bit of a hidden challenge. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think we tell ourselves that we have alignment with the business and we believe that all is well. But in reality, we don't have that. It's something that we tell ourselves because maybe we're making some progress, but we're not making all the progress that we want to achieve. And we rarely seek to actually understand if that's the reality. And this came to the fore for me over the spring period where I've been on the road pretty much nonstop, talking to procurement leaders, listening to conference speakers, and writing and delivering a few presentations. And one particular presentation that I had the opportunity to see, it was from Duncan Jones of Forrester Research. And he presented at the I Value Now conferences, both in Paris and Chicago. And it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. In fact, in a LinkedIn post that it generated some fierce debate about the topic, I suggested that it may be the biggest challenge faced by procurement, the findings of this research. And the research was commissioned by our valuer. It was undertaken, as I said, by Forrester. And I'm going to link to the full findings in the show notes today. But essentially, Forrester surveyed CPOs from around the world to understand the CPO view of their own procurement maturity. Forrester then compared that with metrics from those organizations and applied to their procurement maturity model to see how the perception of maturity met with reality. So at this point, what I'll say is that I don't think surveys like this tell 100% of the story, because what mature looks like for one company is different for what mature may look like for another company. For example, you could rank yourself as mature because you're fully integrated into one category, and that's the category that really matters for your business, and you don't really touch anything else, but that's mature for you because that's important. That's the only category that's really important for you to make an impact in. But we're modeled against a traditional maturity model. it may not be that you're then therefore positioned as mature. You may be positioned as immature. But with that being said, these results are so striking that I think outliers like that don't impact in any material way the overall findings. So here's the data. Of the CPOs that were asked to state their own procurement maturity, 65% stated that the maturity was advanced, versus Forrester's findings of just 16%. That's 16% versus 65% of respondents. Now, 24% stated their maturity is intermediate versus Forrester's findings of 31%, so not that much of a difference there. But then here's the kicker. Just 4% of respondents ranked their maturity as being a beginner from a maturity perspective, whereas Forrester believes that 60% of respondents are actually at the beginner stage. So either Forrester has a deeply flawed model, or this should act as a huge wake-up call for us. And I do want to be clear again about something I mentioned earlier. This doesn't mean that we're not necessarily creating value. In some cases, the value that we create, as I said, may be all that our company wants and needs from procurement. But it does certainly suggest that when benchmarked against peers, a lot of procurement organizations are certainly leaving a lot of value creation opportunities on the table. So how do we solve this problem? Fundamentally, it's not possible to become a mature procurement organization without true strategic alignment and alignment at scale. When I talk about scale, the way I think about that is that a number of organizations, there are individuals within those procurement groups who really have the ability to build true strategic alignment with their partners. Maybe they are really true subject matter experts. They really have the soft skills to build relationships. But at scale, it's, how do we actually apply that and enable the entire organization to exhibit the best practices of those who are kind of leading the way? That's really what I mean by scale. So how can that alignment be sustainable and not contingent upon just a single team member's personal relationship and rapport with an individual stakeholder or a group of stakeholders? And this is something that, we can't answer it all in a 20-minute podcast. But there's one tactic that I see repeatedly work. And I actually talked a little bit about it on the show all the way back in episode 49, which was over 3 years ago. But it's becoming more to the fore this year as I've been doing a lot more work behind the scenes here in developing a framework for procurement organizations to use to create much closer alignment with their business. It's an idea we call procurement as a business. And so I felt that it was a tactic worth sharing with you again. Now, within the procurement as a business framework, there are actually 3 philosophies that are key to business alignment. First is to trust your most senior level executives as investors. Second is to understand which stakeholders you need to engage with and consider them as prospects or customers as you think about it from a sales perspective. And then third is to recognize that everyone else in your organization at any level is a potential influencer. So you must strive to provide them with a positive view of procurement. So today I'm going to share a way that you can put the first philosophy into practice, treating your most senior level stakeholders like investors. But frankly, you can adapt this to mean the most senior stakeholders in your category or your sourcing project. It doesn't just have to apply to the C-suite through the lens of a CPO. If you support IT, it can be the CIO and her key reports. If you support marketing, the CMO and his key reports. So let's think about general investors. How do they align their needs, which is to maximize shareholder value, but whichever way they define shareholder value, with those of the business? And they do so through a board of directors. So the board of directors sets strategy, it directs investment decisions, and essentially helps to manage the trade-off between the two. Now, taking the structure of a board of directors and applying it to procurement is a really effective way to increase stakeholder engagement. Now, I'm sure when I start talking about governance, procurement councils, or cross-functional steering teams, you might switch off and think, we have those, or the governance is for compliance. And that's often what does happen. Because the mission of the team is often, when you think about cross-functional steering teams, for example, is to drive compliance but focus on compliance only. To try and coerce people into using procurement or using the contracts that we have put in place. But when you look at this team of people as investors, your governance structure becomes focused on solving enterprise or category-wide problems. So who should be on the team? So I'm going to focus this on the executive level, but again, you can apply the same principles to your category team too. And there's really three categories of people. First of all, those that set the corporate strategy. So that can be the CEO, the CFO, the Chief Operating Officer, the Chief Administrative Officer. Really people at the highest level of your company or your category. The actual individuals involved, they may vary based on the scale of your company. It might not be possible to get a CFO if you're in a large organization, but you may be able to get the VP of Finance that has the eyes and the ears of the CFO. But it does need to be a senior leadership steering team. After those that set corporate strategy or strategy for the business unit that you support, you want those that pay the bill for procurement. So the people who pay our bill are essentially the people who are arbiters of what the ROI is. These are the people who sign the checks that pay for us as a function, or those that are hit with a central cross charge that is then applied to procurement that is essentially funds procurement. They're the people that really determine what our ROI is. It could be a CFO, could be a controller, but again, it could be the heads of our major stakeholder groups where our cost is sent as an allocated cost in the business. Just depends on how the cost of procurement is paid for within your organization. And just to say also on that is, because they're the arbiter of ROI, they're critical in terms of setting metrics and setting shared metrics, because those are the people who are going to determine, as you try and transition from cost savings based metrics only to metrics that are more business focused, as an example, they're the ones who are going to determine whether you've been successful or not. These are the people that might walk the halls complaining that they pay more for procurement in corporate cross charges than the value they received, or that they perceive they have received from procurement. The third type of people are the functional leaders who are impacting the execution of corporate strategies. This could be a CIO, a head of HR, head of product, head of engineering. Could be a variety of different people, but it's the people who are the most materially involved in helping the CEO achieve her vision for the company. So you have your procurement board of directors. Now let me talk a little bit about what this team does. First and foremost, they align business and procurement strategies. So they focus on setting a common goal. They are managing and resolving conflict that a procurement organization may have with stakeholders across the business, for example. They're also setting the procurement department's organizational strategy and approving investment plans based on the evolving needs of the business. They hold the purse strings for investing and for spending more money on the procurement function. So it's the CPO's job to build capability plans to meet the vision of the team and what the team wants from their procurement organization. And then the board will hopefully approve of those investment plans. So at that point, they're actually invested in the success of those investments. The third thing this team does is to create shared objectives and metrics between procurement and stakeholders. These metrics may be different for each different functional area, but the group approves key category strategies, key sourcing initiatives, key business processes. So they ensure that there's alignment between everybody within the organization. The things that you're doing are all towards meeting the common goals, but importantly, it's helping as well where you have constrained resources, because as a group, you can actually balance the resources that you have with the key primary needs of the business. And doing it this way actually means that it's the board that's making these decisions, or at least having a say in these decisions about resource allocation, that you're not necessarily upsetting individual stakeholders because you're making arbitrary decisions around whether you can support them or not. It's a decision that's made at a higher level and for strategic rather than tactical or execution-based reasons. The next thing the team does is it helps facilitate change. You've got senior level execs on the team, and it's their job to really drive the change throughout their organization that's necessary to enable the value that they need procurement to bring to the table. An additional benefit is that it does hold all members of this board of directors to account, but accountable to each other. So it reduces the number of rogue executives, for example, who do everything they can to cut procurement out of their operations. It's easy for an executive to do that when they're in the silo of their own group. It's a lot harder when they're actually in a group of their peers who are all collectively trying to drive forward the kind of maximization of value that you get from your procurement function. Finally, the team does act as an executive level issue resolution committee. So you do still need that policeman, but it shouldn't be the forefront of the board of directors' responsibility, as normal governance often is. Again, normal governance can be compliance first, strategy second. This is really strategy first, compliance second. It's for anything that can't be resolved underneath this level of governance that gets brought to the team. But just having it in place means you're much more likely to actually resolve issues before they even get to this committee. So how do you bring some formality to this group, which is important as well? It's an important factor in the success of a board of directors like this. First, have a governance charter. So highlight what the purpose of the goals of the team are. What are the responsibilities of the board? How often do they meet? Who are the participants in the board? And are they authorized to delegate their roles to others? How often are they authorized to do that for? And what level can they delegate their authority to? Then what are the inputs and the outputs of the meeting? Without a board of directors, you'll find that procurement's direction and our objectives and our strategy are often set based on the requirements of one individual person to whom we functionally align, be it the COO, the CFO, the CIO, the Chief Administrative Officer. Where he or she sits means that they have a very different perspective, or they may have a very different perspective on what you can achieve, because it's aligned with their goals primarily, not necessarily with the goals of the company. When you're accountable to a board or a steering team, it means that you're thinking in a lot more of a holistic way in terms of bringing value to the company, over and above what one individual stakeholder may need. So in summary, having a board of directors in place like this means that you get that alignment between procurement, between the C-suite, the business stakeholders. It means you have shared and transparent objectives, and it means that you have increased accountability on all sides. And the procurement performance at this point is then measured based on your contribution to shared objectives, not the objectives of one person or solely just on cost. And this governance board is providing that active change management support, which really is critical to help us elevate the impact of procurement. So that's all we have time for this week, and I do hope that this helps you in your efforts to develop stronger alignment with the leaders in your business or your category. If you do have other tactics to share, I would, as always, love to hear from you. But until next week, when we come back with another interview, I just hope that you have a fantastic week. And I want to thank you again so much for listening in to this episode of The Art of Procurement. Hi there, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.